You're listening to the Chapel Sermon Podcast. The Chapel is a non-denominational Christian church welcoming people of all faiths or of no faith background at all. Our desire is that you encounter the presence of God wherever you are in your life.
Oh, thank you, everybody. Good morning. It is I, Putty Putman. I have returned. I'm back. If you don't know me, I was on the chapel team here, the staff team, and then about 18 months ago, you guys launched us out to the Valley of the Sun, Phoenix, Arizona, to plant a church. And so we're busy doing that out there. But this weekend I get to come back and I get to hang out with you guys, and I've been looking forward to it for a long time. It's good to be back, although I'm not used to these temperatures anymore. I woke up this morning and I was like, it comes in 40s? I forgot that, you know? But if you're curious about how it's going out there, I'm really, really encouraged by where we're at. About a month ago, we actually moved our Sunday morning gatherings because we had completely outgrown my home. And the Lord just in that has really connected us to some wonderful new people already, even in the month in between. There's a photo we'll put up here. In the upper left there, that's our very first gathering in early March last year. And you can see, if you look carefully, actually Jeremiah and Kara happened to be there. They were adopting their son, Revel, and it timed out that the very first weekend they happened to be able to join us. And so that was our group as of March last year. The other three photos are all from our first gathering in this new space. And so you can see all the adults, some kids, some more kids, all of that. God's faithful. Look at that, right? From whatever it is of us, 8 of us to whatever that other photo is. I don't know. But we're really, really encouraged. And it's not just that the Lord has been connecting us with some great people, but beyond that, he's just been doing such a beautiful thing in terms of being present and active in our midst. I'll just tell you guys a quick story. I don't even actually know all the details of it yet. But one thing that we regularly do is Phoenix has this thing called the First Friday Art Crawl. And every first Friday of the month, they close about a square mile in downtown Phoenix. And all of these people show up, and all of these like booths and vendors and bands and everything. And there's like I don't actually know the actual population, but I think probably 20,000 people show up. I mean, and I'm not saying that like, you know, metaphorically to say it's a lot. I'm saying I think there's literally 20,000 people that show up. The streets are packed, and it's like from 5 p.m. until I don't even know when it's done. And so we go down there. And we show up, and we've got a bunch of signs we put up. Here's some photos of our little group. This was actually Friday night. I couldn't go because I was preparing to be here, but we show up, and you can see we've got signs for stuff that say like free prayer, or that one says free destiny readings. We've got one that says free spiritual readings too, because all the people who are there are interesting people. It's like, imagine Burning Man, but walk it back just a couple of steps. You've got psychics, and you've got everything going on there. And we hang out and we talk to people and we pray for them and we tell them about Jesus. And it's so cool. We're there. We've actually got a couple of churches that have started kind of coming with us. And I couldn't go on Friday night, but the team leader texted me on Friday night on the way back, just kind of a quick update. He goes, man, it was great tonight. The Lord really shows up. I got to pray for a witch and a tarot card reader, and they both got healed. So I don't know the rest of the details in that story, but like that's what it's like in Phoenix. That's what's going on out there, if that makes sense. And so we're having a great time. It's different. It sure is different. And one of the ways it's different, there's all these differences, right? There's cultural differences, there's climate differences. One of the ways the climate thing plays out, which I didn't really like get my head around until I got out there, is everything is built of different stuff. My house is constructed of a completely different set of materials than I've ever had a house that was made of before. And one of the things that's interesting is we don't have fences that are made of wood. Like I grew up around here and most of the backyard fences are wood, or if they're not wood, like plastic's becoming increasingly common now, right? We don't have either of that. For us, our fences are made of block. They're made of cinder block. And it kind of creates this interesting vibe. Your house feels a little bit like a fortress or something like that. You get this cinder block wall around it, which is either exciting or not, depending on your temperament. But our house, when we moved in, we looked at the fence and we were concerned about the backyard fence. Our house was built in the 70s. Fence is about 50-ish years old at this point, and it wasn't looking so hot. And so this was one of the concerns when we moved in, like, oh man, this isn't in great shape. And so I start looking at it and, like, well, what would it look to cost to, get this repaired? And it turns out block fences are a lot more expensive than wooden fences. And it was like, okay, I don't know what we're gonna do there. So we just started praying instead of trying to attack the problem. And lo and behold, the city actually decided that they were gonna replace our backyard fence because it's on one of the thoroughfares. And so we were like, oh, it's amazing. Like, this is a massive gift. I don't know how much it is, but it's like probably $40,000 or more. Like, this is a big deal. So we're like, gosh, this is so exciting, yay. And so we've been working on this project and we're meeting with the contractor about a month ago, because this literally just started in the last couple of weeks that they've started repairing this fence, or replacing the fence. And so we're meeting with the contractor in August, and we're talking about it, and he's telling us, oh, here's what we're gonna do and all this. He's laying the plan out. And at one point, the question comes up, hey, so, the current fence is kind of not doing so great. How long is this new fence gonna last, right? And the contractor goes, oh, well, okay, let me just shoot straight with you, okay? They didn't build it very well the first time. They used cheap materials, they skipped this step and that step, and so now, as a result, 50 years later, the fence isn't doing so hot. And in fact, I've got photos of it, of the fence that's my wall on the side there, which has got all that cement patching. If you look closely, the blocks are even starting to come apart. There's a bit of a lean. It's not doing so hot. On the bottom is the replacement of, they started doing like 2 houses down or whatever. He says, look, here's the deal. I'm not gonna do it with cheap materials, and I'm gonna do it the right way. And that fence is gonna outlive all of us. And I thought, okay, great, I can live with that. As long as it's somebody else's problem someday and not my problem, cool, I'm down with that, right? And to me, that's a concrete metaphor of a principle that I think we all know, which is true not just in construction, but in life. Which is that if you build with the right materials and you build in the right way, things can last. But if you build with cheap stuff, or if you take shortcuts, things don't last the way they could. They need to be repaired, they get cracks in the seams, they come apart. Relationships, in a way, are a lot like my block wall. Relationships are built, and they're built brick on brick on brick on brick, aren't they? It's a stream of all these different interactions and all these different connections that create this thing that we call a relationship. And if we want to do relationships well, we have to build with the right materials. We have to lay a good foundation, and we have to use not the cheap stuff, but the stuff that lasts if you want it to outlive you, if you want it to last your whole life long. You don't have to do that. You can build relationships with cheap stuff if you want, but then you're gonna have a problem. You're gonna have to figure out what you do when it starts coming apart. And so in this series, we're looking at the assembly required in relationships. What does it look like to build them? And last week, Scott introduced this series by taking us through the story of Ruth, an incredible book in the Bible that unpacks the way that relationships can be shaped if we see one another the way God sees the other person. It's a beautiful, powerful story. We're actually gonna fast forward about 2 generations from Ruth, and we're gonna talk about Ruth's grandson, David, and his introduction in the biblical story. David, when he enters the scene, is caught up in a really complicated, sticky situation with 2 other people named Saul and Jonathan. Saul is the first king in Israel's history. He's crowned king, he's anointed and crowned king in 1 Samuel 10. And Samuel, the prophet for which the book is named, God gives him instructions. Go get this guy, anoint him, crown him king. And so Saul is the first king in Israel's history. And the story starts encouragingly. He leads them to an early military victory. And at this point, the Israelites, they're being oppressed by another people group called the Philistines. And so Saul is making some good first steps, but it really quickly becomes clear that Saul is kind of a mixed leader. He's rash, and he doesn't have the sort of fortitude, the perseverance to handle the complicated situations that his leadership provokes. And so he often kind of starts off heading in the right direction, but then when things get complicated, he compromises. Or he tries to force something through or something like that. And so Saul, while king, is a kind of mixed bag, if that makes sense. Now, Saul is not only introduced early in this story, but his oldest son, Jonathan, is brought into the story at about the same time. And Jonathan actually is revealed to be someone who doesn't seem to have the sort of weaknesses that his father has. Jonathan is a sort of counterpoint to Saul in that he's brave and he's courageous and he's full of faith and he doesn't compromise. In fact, the very first little vignette that we see with Jonathan describes this in 1 Samuel 14. This is kind of in that string of early military victories, and the Israelites are camped opposite an encampment of the Philistines, and it's a tough situation. There's this interesting little detail before this story, which is basically like, hey, so by the way, Saul and Jonathan had swords, but literally they couldn't even have swords, so the rest of the army is fighting with farm tools. Okay, that's the situation here. This is not a good scenario. And so they're encamped opposite the enemy and they're trying to figure out what to do. And Jonathan has this unbelievable moment. It says, Jonathan said to his young armor bearer, "Come, let's go over to the outpost of those uncircumcised men." That's biblical speak for saying those not with us. "Perhaps the Lord will act in our behalf. Nothing can hinder the Lord from saving, whether by many or by few." So Jonathan, he's sitting there, he's looking at the enemy camp on the other side, and he goes, maybe we're overthinking this. I mean, let's be real. Nothing stops God from doing what he wants to do. It's not like the numbers are a big deal. So hey, armor bearer guy, let's just go over there and take on the enemy ourselves. That'd be cool, right? Now, this is either outrageous faith or Jonathan is crazy, right? I mean, you don't do this. This is a very bad idea. And what happens if they fail? They've lost one of two swords in the army, right? This is a crazy thought. But Jonathan, his thoughts seem to be wrapped up with the Lord so much that this actually seems like a good idea to Jonathan. That's what we usually call faith. And what's interesting to me is the armor bearer's response. He says this, "Do all that you have in mind." Now pause here, okay? Real quick. Let's think about this. I mean, Jonathan's the prince, right? The armor bearer has to say yes, doesn't he? Right? I mean, what's he gonna say? No, you're wrong. That's not how monarchies work, right? So the armor bearer has to say this first part, do all that's in your mind. But he says this, do all that's in your mind, his armor bearer said. He didn't have to say this second part. Go ahead, I am with you, heart and soul. Wow, what a fascinating declaration of loyalty. And you know what that shows me? That shows me that Jonathan is not only a person of faith, he sparks faith in others. The armor bearer goes, "Oh yeah, that's a good idea. I'm with you, heart and soul, let's go." And so Jonathan is revealed to be a man of loyalty and a man of faith. And it's incredible. The story happens, they actually do that. They go over to the other side. They cause a stir They kill, I think, about 20 people, if I recall correctly, single-handedly. That causes the whole army to scatter. The rest of the Israelites go and chase down everybody else. And it's this great, incredible military victory that was sparked by Jonathan single-handedly going after the enemy. Okay, so we have Saul and we have Jonathan, okay? And I want to suggest at this point in the story, the picture looks kind of like this. Here's a little diagram, okay? We've got Saul, who has been anointed. That's what the oil bottle is for. And he's been crowned king. That's what the crown is for. And we have Jonathan, his son. And if you think about it, this is a really stable setup, if that makes sense. Because Saul is going to get to be king, and then he's going to give his kingship to Jonathan, which is a good thing for Saul. Because Jonathan is going to be a great leader, and he's going to make Saul continue to look good. Right? So Saul is not only going to get to be king, he's going to have a great lineage, which is going to make him look even better with time. And Jonathan, on the other side, as a son, is going to be motivated to bless and to serve his father, and all the good that results in is going to become his someday, because he's going to get to be king. So everybody is well motivated here. Relationships are in a good spot. But the story gets more complicated. Right after Jonathan wins this military victory, Saul keeps making mistakes. He makes a couple more of them, and by the end of a couple chapters later, God's decided, I'm done with this. I'm done with this Saul guy. I'm not doing this anymore. So he grabs Samuel and he says, hey, Samuel, I want you to go over here and I want you to anoint this shepherd guy from nowhere named David. He's going to be the next king. And so God anoints David and disrupts this nice stable thing we have going on here and reshapes it to look like this. An awkward thing. He's taken away the anointing from Saul and put it on David. But Saul's still king. And now we have three relationships, the three edges of that triangle, which are all complicated. Right? First of all, let's look at Saul and David. What's going on there, right? Well, is Saul going to cooperate with what God's doing here? Or is he going to resist? That's Saul's question. And David's question is he going to try and force something to happen? Take the crown? Or is he going to let God put it in his hands? Saul and Jonathan gets complicated. What's going to happen there? How's Jonathan going to respond to Saul? His dad's disobedience just cost him the crown. Is he going to be happy about that? How's he going to respond, right? And what's Saul going to do? Is he going to kind of defile that relationship by trying to force Jonathan to become the king, even though David has been selected by God? And David and Jonathan, that might be the most complicated of all, right? Because Jonathan, he's the guy who loses the most here. Saul actually still gets to be king. Jonathan is never going to be king. He's the guy who lost the kingship entirely. So how is he going to respond to David? Is he going to be like, cool, dude, you're great? And how's David going to respond to Jonathan? He's the guy who should have been king that you got picked from instead. That probably feels a little threatening, right? This is a really complicated set of relationships. And what's fascinating to me is to see the way that Saul and Jonathan both handle this scenario and what comes out of them in the midst of it. Let's look at Jonathan first. In 1 Samuel 18, we've just picked up the story after a very fascinating little event. David has been anointed as the next king, and the first thing that happens after that is he goes and he kills Goliath. Now, this is sort of an odd situation because David wasn't even there to fight in the first place. He shows up to deliver some supplies to his older brothers who are part of the army. And while he's there, there's this giant who's taunting the Israelites. And David's like, that's not cool. We're not doing that. Somebody's got to fight that guy. And nobody was going to do it. Everybody's afraid. So David's like, I'll do it. And David goes and he kills the guy single-handedly. It's unbelievable. Now, think about this in the story we've been putting together. What did David just do? David did what Jonathan did, but bigger and better. David shows up into the story and goes, oh, hey, Jonathan can single-handedly rout the enemy. I'll do that too, except with a giant. So David waltzes into the story, usurping Jonathan's future role as king and usurping Jonathan's impressive performance as military leader. Ugh, that's kind of ugly, right? And yet, this is Jonathan's response immediately after this event. 1 Samuel 18. After David finished talking with Saul, Jonathan became one in spirit with David, and he loved him as himself. From that day, Saul kept David with him and didn't let him return home to his family. And Jonathan made a covenant with David because he loved him as himself. Jonathan took off the robe he was wearing and he gave it to David along with his tunic and even his sword, one of two in the army, and his bow and his belt. Here's the guy who should be threatened and angry with David. The guy who's just been shown up massively and has just lost his future. And what is Jonathan doing? Jonathan's response is this: I want to be around that. I want to be with you. The thing that's in my heart is the thing that's in your heart. Come on, let's hang out. Let's be brothers. He moves towards David and he starts giving stuff to him. I mean, look at this. Jonathan is practically trying to make David the next prince. He's like, let me take off my princely robe and give it to you. Let me take off my princely armor and give it to you. Let me take off the princely, all this stuff that only he's got as the prince. He starts giving it to David. It's an unbelievable response. I'm gonna be honest, it's convicting. I'm like, I don't think that's what I'm doing. I hope that's what I would do. And so Jonathan responds in an unbelievable way to David. But his father Saul doesn't respond as well. In fact, it's not too long before Saul is trying to kill David because his response is not one of generosity. It's not one of blessing. Saul feels threatened. And Saul starts trying to force his agenda rather than allowing God's agenda to evolve. And so he starts trying to kill David. Now, after a little bit of this, David comes to Jonathan and he goes, dude, I need help, man. This is bad. Your dad's trying to kill me and I don't know what to do. I mean, he's the king and this is a bad deal. And Jonathan goes, no. If my dad was trying to kill you, I would know about it. He keeps me in the loop. And David goes, no, seriously, dude. He knows about our friendship. He's not telling you because of our friendship, your dad's trying to kill me. And so they have this conversation. Now, again, think about this if you're Jonathan, right? If you're Jonathan, you benefit if David dies. Because who's gonna be the next king if David dies? Jonathan. And what's your dad trying to do? Give you the kingdom back. So if anything, here's a moment where Jonathan could be like, I don't know what you're talking about, dude. I'm just gonna check out. We'll just see what happens, right? But Jonathan doesn't do that. Again, he responds in the opposite way. 1 Samuel 20, we see some of Jonathan's response. May the Lord be with you as he's been with my father. But show me unfailing kindness like the Lord's kindness as long as I live, that I may not be killed. And do not ever cut off your kindness from my family, not even when the Lord has cut off every one of David's enemies from the face of the earth. Jonathan's response is not, well, let's just see what happens. He's like, no, I bless you. You're gonna be the king. And my only request is that you'll be kind to me when you are. Unbelievable. And so Jonathan and David, they form this plan to kind of reveal what's going on in Saul. And it's an interesting story. You can read it in 1 Samuel 20. We won't get into the details. But they do this whole thing. And what happens is Saul's heart is revealed. And so he lashes out at Jonathan. It says Saul's anger flared up at Jonathan and he said to him, you son of a perverse and rebellious woman. Nowadays we'd say, you son of a something else. Okay? That's the idea, okay? Don't I know that you've sided with the son of Jesse? The son of Jesse is David. Jesse is David's father. The son of Jesse, to your own shame and to the shame of your mother who bore you. As long as the son of Jesse lives on this earth, neither you nor your kingdom will be established. Now send someone to bring him to me, for he must die. What becomes clear? Saul is like, Jonathan, what are you doing? I'm trying to give you the kingdom. Why don't you cooperate, bro? And so Saul's heart is revealed. And what happens after this, Jonathan goes out, communicates this to David, and they have this tearful goodbye where they reaffirm again their sort of love and commitment to each other. And this leads us into 10 chapters of Saul chasing David around the wilderness trying to kill him. And then there's all kinds of interesting close calls, and David has opportunities to kill Saul and doesn't. And it's a fascinating story. And along the way, we continue to see Jonathan's unbelievable support of David. Here's one last little verse here, 1 Samuel 23. When David was in Horesh at the desert of Ziph, he learned that Saul had come out to take his life. And Saul's son Jonathan went to David at Horesh and helped him find strength in God. Wow. Don't be afraid, he said. My father Saul will not lay a hand on you. You will be king over Israel, and I'll be second to you. Even my father Saul knows this. Two of them made a covenant before the Lord, and then Jonathan went home, but David remained at Horesh. Now, unfortunately, as the story ends in 1 Samuel 31, both Saul and Jonathan are killed in battle. And so Jonathan's desire to be with David as he becomes king actually isn't how the story ends, sadly. But it's fascinating to me that the guy who's the son of one of the worst examples in the Old Testament actually is held up as one of the best examples in the Old Testament. And why is that? Well, I would argue Jonathan knew how to build his relationships with the right stuff. I mean, think about Jonathan and David's relationship. It was complicated from the very first second. And yet the entirety of Jonathan's life, it seems to only grow with time. Whereas Saul has the opposite. Like, he has a tenuous relationship with David, and it only gets worse and worse and worse as time goes on. Even though David is like continually treating him well and blessing him, the relationship's just a nightmare. Saul and Jonathan respond to David in different ways. And that's because they're approaching the relationship with different aims. Our aim, our goal in relationships is like part of the foundation that the whole relationship is going to get built on. And it's easy to kind of like do relationship without really ever looking carefully at what your aim is. You know, we're caught in concrete situations, that we're dealing with concrete people. It's easy to just never kind of stop and go like, well, wait a minute, what am I trying to do here? What it looks like to me is that Saul, he responds out of insecurity, right? He responds out of fear, and so he's threatened. And as a result, he's trying to force, and he's trying to cajole, and he's trying to make his own agenda happen. And all of that's happening because Saul is coming to his relationship with David, and comes to every other relationship you see as well, with the aim of getting something. He's like, hey, I'm here, and I need to get something out of this interaction. And as soon as David becomes a signal to him, not of getting, but of losing, which is what happens to Saul. He loses something. He loses his legacy moving forward. As soon as that happens, Saul can't handle it. He loses it. He freaks out, and he starts like trading on the relationship so heavily that it's not long before he's trying to kill him. But Jonathan doesn't seem like he's trying to get in all these interactions. I mean, what do you see in those passages we just read? Every time Jonathan shows up, he shows up to give. He's like, hey, David, you're amazing. Take my stuff. Hey, David, no, let's figure out how to keep you safe. Hey, David, you're feeling weak. I'm going to go strengthen you in the Lord. Every situation that shows up, Jonathan shows up to give to David, not to get from David. And because of that, even though David is lost for Jonathan, maybe even more lost for Jonathan than he was for Saul, Jonathan never gets thrown off because you can give to someone whether you're getting or not. So Jonathan's goal in the whole thing never gets interrupted. But Saul gets totally messed up because he's planning to get in the interactions, not to give. You see, what Saul and Jonathan teach us are sort of almost archetypal examples. They're characters written large that embody the difference of trying to get in relationship and trying to give in relationship. What's your aim? We can only really have the one. One of them will last our life long. The other probably isn't going to last as soon as the storms show up. And these two kinds of relationship, they're not just sort of connected to David and Saul. These two kinds of relationship are two kinds of relationship that are depicted throughout the scriptures. And in fact, Jesus himself reveals what's going on with the kind of relationship where we show up to give. It says this in Matthew 5 in the Sermon on the Mount. He says, "You've heard it said, love your neighbor and hate your enemy. Get from who you can get from and stop people who try and take from you. But I tell you, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you, that you may be children of your Father in heaven. He causes his sun to rise on the evil and the good, and he sends his rain on the righteous and the unrighteous." Jesus says, look, the goal in this thing is to give because that's what God's like. God's not just trying to give to people who are moving towards him. God gives to his friends and his enemies. So be like God. Do relationship God's kind of way. That's what Jesus is saying. What Saul and Jonathan are is they're pictures of the world's kind of relationship. Come to the relationship to get. And God's kind of relationship. Come to relationship to give. Now, this is so unbelievably countercultural, isn't it? I mean, I don't know about you, but the message I usually hear is something that sounds kind of like this. Well, look, hold on. Let's not be dumb. You don't want to be a doormat, right? You can't give all the time. You'll run out. You'll get burned out. You won't have enough if you give all the time, and people will take advantage of you. So you can't do that. You have to be measured. You have to give some, but you have to make sure you're getting too. And don't forget about self-care, right? You heard that before? Right? I've heard that before. And it's easy to hear that and go, oh, well, that does actually make some sense, doesn't it? And burnout's real, right? Like that's not a fantasy. So what's going on there? And how do we think about that? Well, what I would suggest is that's very sound logic that starts from a different assumption that we start from. See, the starting assumption for the world is that the world it's a closed system. In other words, there's nothing coming in from the outside. Which means every interaction that I have, I can't not use the science word here. It's what's called a zero-sum game. In other words, if you get, I lose. If you get a piece of pie, I didn't get that piece of pie. I lost that piece of pie. And so every interaction that we come to then is a balancing act. Well, if I give away all my pieces of pie and I have no pieces of pie left, then that's not good. So I need to try and make negotiations where I get some pie and you give me some pie in return. This is a balancing thing, right? And that makes all the sense in the world if the world's a closed system, if there's nothing coming from the outside. But I don't know about you, I don't believe that the world is a closed system. I believe that God acts on the world. I believe that God does stuff in this world. And because of that, because God does things, I shouldn't assume that my life should work like a balancing act. Said another way, if God's involved in a situation, the number of pieces of pie doesn't have to stay the same because God's really good at making something out of nothing. So if God's involved, what can happen is I can give a piece of pie to you and find out that I got 2 pieces of pie from God. Now I'm not out one, I gained one and you gained one. Why? Because God is acting in this world. This isn't a world that lives in a vacuum. This is a world that is connected to God. This is why the selfless act of coming to relationship to give, we have to do it in connection with God. If you're just doing it because you're like, oh, it's the right thing to do, you will burn yourself out. You will give away all your pieces of pie. But if every time you come to give, you're doing it in a relational connection with God, what you'll find is that you're giving selflessly and you're receiving the love of God, which is selfless in the process. Jesus says it this way in John 15. He's talking to his disciples. He says this, as the Father has loved me, so I have loved you. Let me articulate what that means. Now remain in my love. If you keep my commands, you'll remain in my love, just as I have kept my Father's commands and I remain in his love. I have told you this so that my joy may be in you and your joy may be complete. Now, you might be wondering, what is that command? My command is this. Love each other as I have loved you. Greater love has no one than this, to lay down one's life for one's friends. What's Jesus saying here? It feels like a little bit of a circular passage, doesn't it? He's like, abide in my love and keep my commandments and love one another. And how's it all fit? And it's easy to kind of try and comb that and figure out exactly what Jesus is saying. It's not actually that complicated. He's just talking like Eastern, not Western. And the idea is simply this. He's saying, look, stay in God's giving love. The way you stay in God's giving love is you actualize that giving love in the world around you. You act as that giving love. You participate in that giving love. And when you actualize God's giving love into the world around you by being giving to the world while in relationship with God, what you'll find is that his joy gets put in you in the process. God's giving love is flowing through you, and you can't be in the space of God's giving love and not be given to. So he's saying, so take the love of God that comes upon you, take the love of God that God has aimed at you, and just give it away, give it away, give it away. And you'll find there's no way you can run out because it's God that's coming through you. And every time you give away, you actually get in the process. And so you're like, here's a pie, and here's a pie, and here's a pie, and here's a pie, and I can't keep up with all these pies I'm getting. Give. That's the picture that's being portrayed here. So in the end, it's actually kind of beautifully simple. Building on the right foundation in relationship, it's not this like complicated, I gotta have the right techniques, gotta figure this out and that out. No. It's actually simple. The way to do this is to come to relationship to give, not to get. And because I can do that in connection with God, I don't have to worry about running out. So just come to relationship to give. And know that if you do that connected to God, you'll be given to in the process, and you don't have to worry about yourself. You don't have to play a balancing act. You don't have to do all that stuff. All you have to do is trust God actually has your back. And if God actually has your back, then we can come to relationships to give, and we can build our relationships in the kind of way that, like my fence, will outlive us. Isn't that what you want? That's what I want. And it's beautiful to me that God's put it together that way, where he's not only allows us to do that, but he sets it up in the kind of way that by doing that, we actually participate in his love and we grow in connection to him in the process. Let's pray. God, you are so good. And I thank you, Jesus, for your selfless love. I thank you that we get to abide in your love, God, that we get to receive it and we get to make it concrete in the world around us. And as we make it concrete in the world around us, we find it's landed on us too. And Lord, this is such a beautiful thing, but God, you know it's like counterintuitive to us, God. And you know the voices around us in our world so say the opposite. And so God, I just ask, Lord, would you take this truth in your word, and God, would you put it like deep, deep, deep in our hearts? And would you open, Lord, our hearts and our eyes and our minds, God, to see that as real? And would you take that and would you grow that in our awareness and make it bigger than all the voices around us that say the opposite? We want to do relationship the way you do it, God. We want to come to give. And so I ask right now that you'll grow that up in each and every one of us, God, and that you'll give us like so much of your giving love that we can't help but give it to the world around us. Lord, we can't do it without you, but I thank you we don't even have to try. We thank you that we don't have to try and convince you to do it, Lord. You're so eager to do this with us. And so we just receive your love and your goodness, God. Let us be lights of that love and goodness in the world around us. In your name we pray. Amen.
Thank you for listening to our podcast. We hope this was an encouraging and uplifting experience for you. If you'd like to listen to more of our sermons, you can visit the messages page of our website at chapel.org/messages.